Auditor General Kimi Makwetu is urging political leaders to set an example for municipalities. Only 18 of the 257 municipalities have managed to get clean audits for the previous financial year. The Auditor General says the latest figures point to a lack of accountability in local government. Professor Alex van der Heever from the Wits School of Governance is with me now to unpack these latest figures on our municipalities. Prof, very good morning to you and thank you for coming in. So, the figures are out. Once again, we're hearing promises to do better and calls for more accountability, but will things actually change?
Well, things won't change until there is a sort of a consequence to what is being laid out in the Auditor General's report. So there is a lack of consequentiality in the system. What is very good about the Auditor General's report is it actually makes transparent what's going on, and that's a very important part. But what's not happening at the moment is dealing with the people who are responsible for these systemic failures in the municipalities and provincial governments, if you look at the previous Auditor General's report, which dealt with provinces.
Just on the lack of consequence, the Auditor General, Kimi Makwetu, when he released these numbers on Thursday, also said that transgressors simply aren't facing the consequences. Why is that when year in, year out, those in power say, no, we need to do better with municipalities, there needs to be accountability, yet again the Auditor General releases another report saying it's simply not happening?
So normally the performance of any organisation and any sort of system depends on where the accountability for performance radiates from the centre, from the people with the power. And what is happening is that the people at the top of the system who are accountable and responsible for this performance are in fact being promoted, not being fired. So if you look at a province like Free State, if you look at the municipal results and you look at the Provincial Auditor General's results, you see systemic failure. And yet the person who is Premier of that province, who is directly accountable for what has occurred in that province, is in fact being promoted within the ruling party. So that in fact is an indication of a lack of consequences. You're rewarding people for doing badly.
Is political patronage to blame then?
Yeah, we effectively have governance structures in place that support that institutionalize corruption instead of reverse it. So there is a problem with how the governance frameworks are structured so that there isn't an adequate separation between the political structures and the administrative and delivery structures. Without that separation, it means that people's political advancement with, for instance, in the ruling party or any party that becomes a ruling party, ends up abusing the state in order to further their own political personal political ambitions. And that is a very, very poor model for running public services.
Irregular expenditure down to 25.9 billion rand compared to 29.7 billion rand in the 2016-2017 financial year. Still quite a high figure, but a positive development nonetheless.
I don't think so. I think that, first of all, not all the information was in on that, so we'll probably see an adjustment in due course. 25 billion rand of irregular expenditure is astounding and shows a massive failure at that level. So think what 25 billion rand properly spent can do for the country. That irregular expenditure implies that almost everything spent on that was inappropriate, improper, ICT systems we shouldn't have, contractors who didn't actually perform. That's what's implied by that 25 billion.
The Auditor General, we know, now has more teeth, if you will, based on amendments to the Public Audit Act. These came into effect in April, but is that going to be the serum that fixes it all?
It's only one sort of consequence that you can introduce into the system. When you look at this performance, and it's so systematic, you would expect, firstly, a large part of what we're seeing, particularly the irregular expenditure, has criminality behind it. So we do have a system of criminal investigation and prosecution. And because we've had that structure hollowed out over the past 10 years, that important part of sort of consequences for poor conduct is not actually applied. This is criminality just as opposed to just poor performance.
I'm quite interested, Prof, to get your thoughts on the argument that just because a municipality's books or a department's books aren't in order, it doesn't mean that the citizens are robbed of services.
I think it's a very strong indicator that if they can't keep their books in order, it shows that there's a lot failing it's a good proxy indicator of general performance, because in fact having your accounts in order, just that aspect, aside from irregular expenditure, which is an indication of poor conduct, it means that a lot of other things aren't in place, because if you can't get your books in order, you can't run a service very well. It shows you're just not capable of running a good public service.
Prof, thank you so much for your time. That was Professor Alex van der Heever from the Wits School of Governance.